All right, good evening. My name is Felicia Moore. I'm Chair of the Finance Executive Committee. To my right is Councilmember Howard Shook, a member of the Finance Executive Committee, as well as Mr. C.T. Martin to my left. And I'm sure other council members may join us. We're going to start off with our official public hearing, and as soon as they come and take their places, we'll start off with a presentation from the Finance Department and from the Mayor's Office related to the budget. After that, we will take testimony from the public, and if you would like to speak, they have a sign-up sheet outside, so please make sure that you sign up to speak. And each speaker will be given 3 minutes in which to give their oral testimony. If you have questions, you do have some sheets that we passed out that you can write your questions down so we can get them answered. But if you just like to ask the questions when you come up, or just go ahead and give your testimony, we'll take that at the time that you speak. Following the signed up speakers, then we will call the public hearing portion to a close, and then we will go into the interactive session. Members of the public are able to send us questions. Some of them are probably home watching it via Channel 26 or live on the web. You can go to atlantaga.gov and watch it live on the web, and they can email or tweet us or call in at 404-330-6309 and give us your questions, and they will bring them to me and I will ask them. We have several members of the city departments that are here to answer those questions if necessary. So I'm waiting on, I saw him going out, but I haven't seen him come back in. The Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Utz from the Mayor's Office, so they can give their presentation. Oh, here he is. We're waiting on you. We also have Ms. Yolanda Adrian, who's Vice Chair of the committee, who has joined us. And so we're going to have you sit here.
Are you sitting here?
No. You can sit there. He's just going to move that. That's the computer for me to get the, yeah. And Mr. Beard was in the hall, and I thought he was coming. He was waiting on you. I think he was stalling. He was getting out of my sight because I was okay, now you come in. You were hiding from me, Mr. Beard.
Let me do this myself.
So we're going to start with the presentations. Those that are here, I know that it might be difficult, but they will be projecting it on the screen as best as possible. And for those who are watching on television, we will project it there as well. We are still working with our new technology. It's not the best, but you can also look online. If you're on TV, you can go online and pull up the documents and see them. So without further ado, we'll start with Mr. Utz from the Mayor's Office, followed by our CFO.
Good afternoon, early evening, everyone. I'm going to walk through the budget at a very high level, and then Mr. Beard here will go through some of the more detailed items in the budget. So to start, there are a number of initiatives that we're proposing investing or having a focus on in this year's budget. Starting with public safety, this year will be the year that we actually hit 2,000 police officers. We'll be hiring an additional 41 police officers, which will get us to that particular number. Additionally, we are proposing investing in code compliance and increasing the number of code inspectors that we have out in the field, as well as providing some additional resource support for those inspectors in the office. Around fiscal stability, we're pleased to report, and Mr. Beer will go in more detail on this, but we're pleased to report that this will be the first year in, as far as most of us can remember, that we've actually hit the 20% reserve amounts within our reserve funds. So this is a good news story. I actually have a slide where we'll go in a little bit more detail about that in a moment. Around youth development, one of the primary things that we've focused on this year in the recreation department is ensuring that for every facility where there is youth programming, we will make sure that there is a dedicated facility manager to oversee that facility. So historically, we've actually had facility managers that would manage more than one facility. This year, with the increase of 6 facility managers, we'll be able to say that every facility with youth programming in it will have a single dedicated facility manager. Around economic development, I think one of the primary components of economic development that we want to discuss is an increase to the funding and in the investment, I would say, that we're making in Invest Atlanta, the city's economic development agency. We are increasing the amount we provide Invest Atlanta by $1.1 million. That will ensure a $3 million investment from the city for fiscal year 13. And then around some of the items under customer service and excellence, one of the things that we're going to be investing in this year is around our 311 call center, and or I should say a project to improve customer service. One of the things that's being explored is a 311 call center, but ensuring that we actually provide the appropriate customer service, customer training to our employees that are dealing with the public. So to step into some of the details, we wanted to first start with taking a look at the revenues. These are tax-based revenues coming into the city. This is a rather dramatic slide. It actually shows revenue anticipations over a 10-year period. And you'll notice that from 2008 to 2012, we have the adopted budget numbers. 2013, we're anticipating receiving $526 million into the general fund this year. This is the lowest amount that the city will have received over this time frame, and in fact is $100-some million below where it was in fiscal year 8. This underscores really some of the challenge that the city of Atlanta has had to address in the last number of years, and actually has addressed over the last number of years. We are projecting that this is in fact the bottom, and moving forward we'll see ourselves slowly climb out of this dip. Now, we're not going to climb out rapidly, but this year is the worst year in a 10-year period. So this is talking about the reserves. Given that we've actually dropped some $100 million in income into the city, this slide shows some of the work that both the administration and council has done to put ourselves on a much stronger financial footing. Starting in fiscal year 09, we had just a couple of $1 million in reserves, about $7 million in reserves for the city. We would expect to be somewhere in a 15 to 20% range of reserves. So it effectively meant that there wasn't any safety net for the city starting in fiscal year 09. Based on some very, very difficult decisions that council and the administration had to make around investments and priorities, we've been able to very consistently put significant amount of money into the reserves over the last several budgets. And in fact, this year we're projected to be starting the year with 20% set aside. So this is a very good news story, and it actually has put the city on a much more stable financial footing for going forward. I know this is a little bit difficult to see for those of you that are in the audience, but this breaks out both from the revenue side and the expense side how you walk to the balanced budget. We are projecting a budget of $543 million, or I should say we are proposing a budget of $540 million for fiscal year 13. If you look at fiscal year 12, that is down from fiscal year 12 by about $11 million. Between the revenues that we are expected through tax funding, or taxes this year, as well as some unassigned fund balances, we'll get to the $540 million. On the expense side, if you take a look, we're looking at about $527 in pure operating expenses carried over from the prior year, an incremental about $5 million in investments that we discussed on the first slide of the presentation. And then we are still anticipating putting another $13 million aside into the reserve through the fiscal year 13. So even though we've actually hit some of the range that we're wanting to be in terms of a reserve, we are proposing, just from a conservative standpoint, to continue to invest in that reserve. That concludes the this is an incredible eye chart. I'll let Mr. Beard go through this in more detail, but we also have the breakout of each of the various departments by budget line item. And as well, on the right side of this chart, you can see, we'll provide handouts and put this online, you can see what each of those particular initiatives are and the breakout of that $5 million of incremental spend.
Thanks, Hans. Can you bring up the next? There we go. So taking a step back and getting a little bit higher level view of where we are and where we came from, I want to talk about the fiscal condition of the city from a bigger picture standpoint. Over the past 3 years, the fiscal condition of the city has changed dramatically. We've hired more than 525 police officers. We've opened all the recreation centers. And as Hans spoke to, we've increased the fund balance to more than $94 million. Continued progress cannot occur without fiscal discipline. Improving the city's fiscal position is a long-term strategy, and it requires proactive decision-making over multiple years. We continue to face challenges in the economic environment in which we are operating, and property tax revenues in the proposed budget are going downward and with slow growth moving forward. Expenditures have been reduced as revenues decline, and the city is providing more services with fewer resources. The effective service delivery is key to providing services and initiatives set forth by the mayor. Hans has gone over the major initiatives proposed, and the budget is set out to provide these major items. I'll talk to the major topics again: public safety, fiscal stability, youth development, economic development, and customer service. So, looking at where we are and where we're proposing, let's start with the tax rates. The budget for fiscal year 2013 reflects zero change in the millage rates proposed. For the operating budget, the millage rate would remain at 10.24 mils. For bonds, that would be the payment on debt service, general obligation bonds, and for other various city bonds, 1.2 mils. For parks, funds related to expenses in Atlanta's parks remains at 0.5 mils, for a total levy of 11.94 mils. This is the same levy as we've had in previous years. So let's look at where the overall tax levy goes. In this chart, it shows you that 0.5% goes to the state of Georgia. The school general fund receives 49%. School bonds, 0.1%. Fulton County, 23.7%. The city general fund receives 23%, city parks 1%, and city debt service 2.7%. So let's look at the history of what we've accomplished. The millage rate back in 2008 was 7.12 mils. It stayed there in fiscal year 2009, and in fiscal year 2010, City Council and the administration at that time was forced to make a very difficult decision and increase the millage rate to 10.24 mils. This rate is in effect today and is proposed to stay in effect in the upcoming budget year. But if you notice, the millage rate has stayed the same. The tax digest as presented on this slide has gone down. In fiscal year 2009, the tax digest stood at $27.6 billion, and we're projecting the tax digest going forward to be in the range of $23 billion, a $4 billion decrease in the overall value of taxable property in the city. So when we look at this slide, you can notice what's happened in our property tax revenue. In the far right-hand side, you can see the projected or the forecast revenue of $173 million from property tax assessments. That's down from a high in 2010 of $209 million. That's a significant decrease for the city to absorb over a relatively short period of time. One of the most striking measurements that we look at is something called the dollar value of a mill. How much property tax does a single mill generate for the city? This will show you the effect of the changes in property tax value over the period between 2010 and the current 2013 anticipations. So if you look at the dollar value of a mill in 2010, you'll see that it was at $20.4 million. In the projected fiscal year 2013, a dollar value of a mill will only raise $15.8 million. Once again, it shows you how many dollars the city has lost in revenue over a relatively short period of time. So in constructing this budget, the Department of Finance and the administration had to make a series of assumptions on revenue and expenses. These assumptions are laid out on this slide. We've assumed that the property tax digest would be down 5% based on negative assessments of property tax values. As we've spoken before, the dollar value of a mill we've figured would decline to $16.8 million in fiscal year 2013. The city has elected not to adjust the millage rate to accommodate for the continued slide. We've been conservative in our sales tax forecast and have a growth range between 0.5 and 1.5%. And we've looked at business license and hotel-motel tax forecast to also grow slowly at 1.5 to 1%, with a slow recovery in jobs. In this budget, we've removed revenue that we would have previously received from building permits, as it's now a separate enterprise fund. On the expense side, fiscal year 2013 service levels are based primarily on what the service levels were in 2012. We've based an increase in health care cost to roughly $7,706 per person. And we've also accounted for differences in the pension's annual required contribution. We've looked at a slight increase in workers' compensation, and we've looked at some savings and expected savings in utilities. That would be electricity and natural gas. As stated by Hans earlier, we've also looked at pay and class funding for positions where we found that the incumbent person or that position was at a significantly low pay rate for that type of job. While Hans has showed you this slide, one of the things that we proposed in this budget is reducing the reserve requirement, the budgeted reserve requirement. Previous budgets were based around a 5% budgeted reserve. The budget as presented at this point includes a 2.5% budgeted reserve, which is also a reduction of 2.5%. We think this strikes a balance between providing additional funds in the reserves and meeting current operating needs for the city. As Hans talked to earlier, we've noticed that the revenue has declined and slow growth going forward. But you'll also notice that the slope of the growth is quite dramatically different from the slope of the decrease. Once again, as you've heard economists talk about a slow recovery, that's what is depicted in this slide. Also, going forward in expenses in the out fiscal years, fiscal year 14 through 17, we've basically reached a point where we've projected very slow growth in our expense projections and are attempting to hold them steady over those out years. Of course, this is subject to change as the needs of the city unveil themselves as we move forward. So in going through the department by department budgets, I'll tell you some of the larger departments and some of the larger areas. In the total revenues for the city, we projected exactly $593,779,856 in revenue coming in. Where will that money go? Police department is a large chunk of it at $168 million. Fire at $76 million. Parks and Recreation at $31 million. Information Technology, $28 million. The Executive Offices, $26 million. Department of Corrections and Public Works at approximately $25 million apiece. The Department of Finance at $12 million. Judicial agencies budgeted at approximately $9 million. City Council at $7.5. The Law Department at roughly $5 million. Human Resources at roughly $5 million. The Office of Solicitor at $2.6 million. Department of Planning and Community Development at $2 million. Public Defender at $1.5. Department of Audit at $1.3 million. The Department of Procurement at roughly $900,000. The Atlanta Citizen Review Board at roughly $400,000, and the Department of Ethics at another roughly $400,000. So in that, there were certain strategic initiatives that Mr. Utz called out. The addition of 41 police officers. We budgeted those in a half-year increment, since we can't hire all 41 on the first day of the fiscal year, and that amounts to $1.6 million. Investments in Invest Atlanta and their critical mission to the city at $1.1 million. Office of Sustainability, $950,000. Code enforcement, $600,000. Recreational facilities managers for the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs at $300,000. And the International Affairs Office and Arts and Cultural Affairs at a roughly $250,000 each. So what does that look like when we back up and look at the big picture? If we break it down, you'll see in the pie chart where the largest sections and smaller sections of the city government's budget goes to. Taking those same numbers and looking at them a different way, you'll see that roughly 62% of the budget goes to personnel services, with 11% going to purchase services, 7% to supplies, other costs 6%, debt service payments 7%, reserves 3%, and interfund and interdepartmental charges as well as other financing sources at 2% apiece. The city has several other operating funds that aren't included in this presentation. These are departments other than the general fund. The Water and Wastewater Revenue Fund at roughly $550 million. The Airport Revenue Fund at $483 million. The Group Insurance Fund at roughly $121 million. Solid Waste Services at $47 million. Fleet Services at $32 million. Our Emergency 911 Services Fund at roughly $16 million. Atlanta Underground at roughly $11 million. Permits, $7 million. Civic Center, $1.7 million. And the Cyclorama Facility, roughly $500,000. That concludes this portion of the presentation, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson, Mr. Beard. At this time, we will take the sign-in sheet from those people who signed for the public hearing. The first person to sign up was Mr. Ron Shakir. I saw him. Oh, there you are.
Ron Shakir, Southwest Atlanta. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to participate in this process. My concern is that the lack of quality or shared development of our city and investment in our infrastructure. We've chosen to spend money on 525 more policemen at a time when we have the lowest population in recent history. And to give Invest Atlanta an extra $1.6 $1 million increase is also it's bad management to me, considering the fact that we have asked in committee meetings and public hearing for them to give an audit on some of their projects, and it has not been done. And I think that just goes along with some of the judgment that this administration have chosen to guide Atlanta down. The fact is, we could have had this investment money spent for infrastructure that could have made our neighborhoods and community look better, but it seems like you'd rather spend investment in chasing the terrible citizens that you have in this city. The citizens who built and made this city beautiful, you want to put it in code enforcement like we don't know how to take care of our properties with our budgets that we live under. And then you're going to spend $2.5 million for demolition. $2 million for demolition. I think it goes along with the meanness that this administration have decided to spend its resources on. And the fact is that the money that you have spent running citizens out of this country, those citizens purchase things. And I didn't see no retail taxes that a percentage of them, from what I understand, stays in the city of Atlanta. So I would just hope that this city council would be a little bit more diligent before they pass legislation that give automatic lease agreements, and to instead of spending money on more police or spending money on snowmobiles. You understand? I just believe that we have schools that's under attack, where we have recently 13 schools that was going to be subject and targeted for closing. And our mayor said that he didn't want to be the mayor known for running the Falcons out of town. You know, I believe that we ought to protect our communities and our neighborhoods, and I would just hope that in all the good work and the hard work that this administration have done, and the elected officials and the policy makers have done, that they would work a little harder in making sure that the resources are spent equitably and without the meanness that we see in some of the decisions they make in spending their money and concentrating on demolishing properties.
Okay.
That
I was waiting for the end of the sentence.
Okay, let me just end it with this right here.
Your time is up.
Thank you. Just the fact that we got this here 1.5 million. It went down from 2 million, and we didn't see no betting for that. What you call it? When you have
I don't know, Mr.
when you have a project, the project was just like it was given to 3 people opposed to having it bid it out. So
thank you. Your time is up, Mr. Shakir.
Okay, it's just 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Miss Margaret Connolly.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Margaret Connolly, and I'm the Executive Director of Park Pride. That's my day job, but my full-time job is that I'm the mother of a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. And so my kids, parks are very important to me, both in my professional life and my personal life, as we spend a lot of time in parks. And the other thing that it means is that I spend a lot of time kind of living in fantasy life with a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. And on Monday night, we were driving home from t-ball practice, and my son was in the back seat in his car seat, and he said, just matter of fact and with total conviction, that he could hit the ball farther than anyone in the whole world. And he said it like there was no way that I could potentially argue with him about that. So on Tuesday, when I sat here and listened to Commissioner Dusenberry present his budget to the council, and I have great respect for Commissioner Dusenberry and the partnership that we share with the City of Atlanta. But I was inclined to just really take in and believe what he said. But when I heard him talk about the potential addition, the questions that came up about the potential addition of Fort Mac and the Beltline parks, and the additional park space that parks are going to have to start maintaining this year, and the statement that with no additional resources that they could do that adequately, I was a little surprised. And when we think about all the things that go into park maintenance, you have to train your staff, you have to have the staffing to be able to do it, you have to have the equipment to be able to do it. When I think about the things that have happened in the past year with copper theft and the resources that takes from the Parks Department, that they don't budget for it, they have to take it from somewhere, it comes out of operating. So there are all these additional expenses that are coming out of parks that aren't budgeted. And I think about, we want all parks to be maintained and look like our Beltline parks do right now. And I'm very concerned, both as an advocate for parks, as a citizen, as somebody who goes to parks almost every day with my kids, that we're going to start to see a decline if there aren't additional resources put into the parks budget. I'm very grateful to the mayor's office that there aren't significant proposed cuts going into FY 2013. I was also very excited to hear you say that when we think about the sustainability and the financial health of the city, that we need to be proactive and think long-term. And I'm just really looking forward to having a very proactive and long-term conversation about what it's going to take to have our parks maintained at a level where our communities can feel safe and engaged and continue to feel proud about the public spaces that we provide to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are the only two people I had signed up to speak. Is there any other member of the public that is out there? Someone could get that from her. She wants to give it in writing. Any other members of the public to speak at the public hearing? If not, I will officially call the public hearing to a close. And now we'll go into our interactive session where we will take questions from the public. And if you are in the audience as the public, I think they gave you a sheet where you can write your questions out and present them to us, and we will take them from here. The first question is for the Department of Finance. And I know they had 3 questions over here, so if you can ask them to get those to me as well. Why has there been a $100 million decline in revenue over the past 10 years?
A major source of the revenue for the city is the tax base. So what's happened is, over the last few years, you've seen the value of real property in the city decline, which is, so the taxable value is based on 2 things: a millage rate and a value. So it's either one of those decline, the overall collections go down. The situation here is a dramatic decrease due to the housing crisis has created the effect of a major decrease in the overall collections. And this, it doesn't happen on a single house basis, it happens on entire neighborhoods. So as one house in a neighborhood is foreclosed on, the valuation in that entire neighborhood goes down. That's why you see these dramatic effects throughout the property tax register.
Okay. The next question is for the Atlanta Police Department. The chief is here, and I want to thank the administration and all of the departments for being present. How do you calculate funding for our city's public safety needs?
How do we calculate that? Well, obviously, we have to look at what is the requirement for making sure that our citizens are safe and visitors, and making sure that we can determine what is the best plan of putting police officers on the streets. And then, of course, we back into that on what it costs for an officer to be placed on the streets, and then come up with a total number of what our cost would be for as personnel. Obviously, if you look at our budget is about 93% personnel and salary.
Thank you. For finance, will there be a tax increase to balance the 2013 city budget?
The proposed budget is put forth and does not have any tax increase at all in it. The millage rate is held constant.
What are the indicators that predict FY 2014 to show an increase in revenues for the city compared to FY 2013?
So that's a very good question. So looking forward, we start to look at property property sales and how many properties sell at foreclosure and what the discount is. What we're starting to see is that there seems to be a base building in property tax values for properties throughout the city. In other words, they're not selling as cheap. There's certain areas of the city, obviously, that this doesn't hold, but overall through the city, we're feeling like there's a base. We're also starting to see a return to retail sales. People are starting to buy more as they feel better about the economy. Those 2 things lead us to believe that we've kind of gotten to a place where if we do have any sorts of declines, they'll be modest. We're actually projecting a slight increase.
Is there a projection for amount of investment into the reserves post FY 2013? Will the amount decline based on hitting the 20% number base?
So that's another excellent question. We've done a little research here, and we've seen that other cities have a reserve requirement, reserves that are set between 15 and 30%. Generally what we found is people who have 30% reserves tend to be in what we call high-risk areas where hurricanes, floods, and those sorts of things are quite common. You'll see large reserves in places in Florida, for example. The charter change that was put forward says that we must keep between 15 and 20% in reserve. What that allows us to do is as the overall value of the budget, the overall size of the budget increases, the amount of reserves will increase, and it will allow us to invest in providing services in the current budget year if the overall budget stays the same. So the long and short answer is we projected in 2013 to put 2.5% into the reserves. In 2014, the current projection going forward is the same 2.5%. But then we'll have to see exactly where we are and what the overall base looks like in this time next year, and we'll make those determinations based on the overarching theme of keeping between 15 and 20% in reserves at all time.
What is the Underground Atlanta Reserve Fund?
I'm not quite unsure of the question. I don't
know. I assume this person may be looking at the budget document. Is there an Underground Atlanta Reserve Fund, or is...
Oh, let's see what we're talking about here. Oh, the Underground Atlanta Revenue Fund. Okay.
Okay, it's Revenue Fund.
I understand now. So the Underground Atlanta Revenue Fund is a fund set up to pay basically revenues come into Underground Atlanta to pay certain costs associated with Underground Atlanta, and also revenues go out to pay for expenses. This year we budgeted revenues in that fund of roughly $11.2 million. The expenses tend to come in slightly higher than that, but as we move forward, that is the revenue that we project to come in.
Why doesn't the city sell Underground Atlanta to a developer? Are we still paying the debt service on that facility?
Is the questioner interested in buying?
Go ahead. You can go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So we're evaluating, is the council, the administration, as well as finance are evaluating a number of possibilities as relates to Underground Atlanta. That's a project that's started earlier this year and is continuing. We really don't have any hard answers as to what to do with that particular piece of property at this time, but if you want to buy it, give me a call.
All right.
Right now, fundamentally, given the conditions of the market, it is difficult to find interested buyers that are both interested and financially capable to purchase it. Hopefully, it is our hope, certainly, as the economy begins to recover, that makes something, a movement in that area more feasible.
This is for the Department of Public Works. It's Miss English on Myrtle Street in Midtown. I moved to Atlanta 4 years ago and instantly fell in love with it. My love affair has worn off in the last year considering the condition of the city's sidewalks. If sidewalks exist at all, is there money in this budget to repair sidewalks in older neighborhoods such as mine? My husband and I pay taxes too.
Thank you. Richard Mendoza, Commissioner of Public Works. We do have a material line item for concrete and repair materials in the 2013 budget. However, it is an amount that only allows us to react based on calls for sidewalk repairs. We are working on a more aggressive, proactive program utilizing other funds, not the general fund budget, but these would be other funds such as the Sidewalk Trust Fund to more aggressively be proactive in doing sidewalk repairs. But right now we are in a reactive mode in terms of sidewalks.
Okay, you might as well stay there. Ms. Gwendolyn Lewis of Southwest Atlanta in District 10. The city has a trash problem, especially south of I-20, from illegal dumping to litter on every block. What is being done about it?
I'm going to ask Deputy Commissioner Dexter C. White to address this question.
Deputy Commissioner Dexter C. White, City of Atlanta's Public Works Department. In this budget for 2013 is the hiring of 40 extra help that would be dedicated to addressing the city's litter problems and right-of-way maintenance. And also, we are looking at the possibility of contracting out to some larger companies to address some of our major thoroughfares because of the lack of equipment that we don't have, such as zero-turn radius tractors and tractors that have bush hogs. But these other private companies do have that type of equipment, so we're looking at the possibility of contracting out those services.
Russell Logan of Camilton Road in Southwest Atlanta for Department of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. Mayor Kasim Reed promised to reopen all of the city pools and recreation centers when he was elected. The Oakland City Pool has not been open for at least 4 to 5 years. I think our children are as important as anybody else in the city. Since the pool has not had any funding for at least the last 5 years, when is the pool going to be put into the city budget, and when will it be fixed?
George Dusenberry, Commissioner for Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. There were a few pools that the city was unable to open because the cost of opening them was 7 figures, pretty much $1 million to fix those pools, and Oakland City was one of those. The department is in the process to actually, probably later this year, of doing a comprehensive facilities plan for the city, identifying where the demand is for various functions such as pools, tennis courts, recreation centers, and then basically coming forward with a plan that would allow us to provide those services. Currently, we do have a pool at Adams Park, which is relatively close to Oakland City Park, but we have no short-term plans in terms of opening that, but we are developing a comprehensive needs analysis of that.
I got a couple that are, some are just comments from a Ruth Beth. This is not for you particularly. I've always had a sense of pride in the dome being the Georgia Dome. I'd be saddened for it to be suddenly named after a brand. From the same person, could any fiscal allocation for the stadium be used for social services in low-income communities? For example, support of Grady. Anybody know the answer to that question? I would assume not.
If the question is, are we putting money into the Georgia Dome in this budget, there is not an allocation within this general fund budget that envisions investing in the Georgia Dome or the stadium.
There was John Searles. His question is, with the loss of large bookstores like Borders in Metro Atlanta, will there be any consideration for new libraries? And that would be handled by the Atlanta-Fulton County Library Board, and I do know that there are some new libraries in line. Ms. Martin, do you know how many new ones are coming up?
8.
He said 8. He sits on that Board of Trustees. Naomi Anderson, is there any support plan for MARTA beyond raising fares annually? And that would be handled with the MARTA board, and so we don't have a particular answer to those questions. John Searles asks, what plans are there for small business support and development?
I think this question's for Invest Atlanta, the budget. Included in the budget ask are several items as it relates to small business programs, small business ombudsmanship. Some of the new programs that will be included this year are targeted small business entrepreneurial outreach programs, monthly financing seminars, business consultations, and these are one-on-one consultations where we meet with businesses, find out what their needs are. Speaking engagements to teach people about different programs that are available to them, make sure that they find access. And then the ombudsman side, ombudsmanship programs would include business outreach, one-on-one business consultations, but also working with the other city departments to make sure that we remove obstacles for those small businesses so that they can grow and flourish.
Thank you. And I would encourage the public out there, if you have questions, to send them now, otherwise we're going to wrap it up. I do know there's another question coming in. Mr. Shakir, did you have a question you were writing down? My staff member's coming to get it, but you can speak.
I was going to actually request, Council Member, I know both of our distinguished speakers raised a few questions when they came up to speak, and we can certainly address some of the questions.
Please do.
First of all, regarding some of the infrastructure questions that were raised, certainly we recognize that that is a key area that is of need within the city. Unfortunately about infrastructure is there is no $1 million fix. It's literally on the order of billions of dollars required on that front. So part of the solution to fixing infrastructure with the city is to ensure that we could speak from a position of strength fiscally, which is partially why we've made such a strong investment in the reserve funding. Secondly, there are a number of investments that are planned on being made in infrastructure. Certainly, it's not going to resolve the entire need that's out in the city, and we recognize that. But we are, to Commissioner Mendoza's point, identifying several $1 million worth of sidewalk repairs and such that needs to be done. We're also in the process of unwinding a number of long-term bonds that we have that will repurpose dollars there. It's on the order of $4 to $5 million that we'll be able to unwind. Again, that is not going to solve the $1 billion issue, but it is able to be deployed in areas of highest need. The second question around some of the concerns on parks, I know that there is a distinct concern around the absorption of Fort Mac and whether or not we'll be able to support those parks. The anticipation is that those parks will be transferred over to the city later in the year, past the mowing and care cycle required. It is obviously recognized that as those come onto our books and we're required to care for them, it's something that will need to be anticipated in future budgets. But it is not expected that we'll be needing to maintain those parks, for example, over this summer, where we would obviously need the additional crews. Oh, I'm sorry, there was one other note with it. The question was definitely raised around copper theft. That is an absolute thorn in the city's side. I get emails and phone calls from Commissioner Dusenberry, it feels like hourly at this point, about that particular issue. It is a difficult issue to resolve. Replacing copper means that it gets pulled back out again. So there are a number of things that we're exploring on that particular front. One of the things that we're excited about is the ability to potentially make some strategic investments in solar capabilities that actually just removes the copper out of those locations. At the moment, we're also being careful about where we choose to replace and how much we choose to replace, because we recognize every $10,000 of copper that we put out there to replace, it ends up being needed to get replaced again a few months later. So I think there's a careful and thoughtful approach around how to get the copper out of the poles that is the ultimate long-term solution on that front.
Mr. Shook wanted to respond to Ms. Conley's.
Yeah, and then Ms. Connolly, I'm sorry, I can't. There you are. You know, I completely agree with your statement, and a lot of my constituents do too. They have concerns about acquiring raw land for parks, you know, without the sidewalk infrastructure already in place and crosswalks and park staff and all that. You know, as you know, my problem is I've got 23% on average of what the other districts have in the city, and we're falling farther behind every month. You know, in a perfect world, we would do it your way, but currently the world is in no danger of being called perfect, and I'm going to say I'm going to push as hard and as fast as I can to get every inch I can. And because of the recession, there's the banks and people own property they don't want to own. I mean, we've got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to try to catch up, so I feel obligated to stockpile what I can and hope that people sort of understand we may have to wait a little while for some of the other pieces to catch up.
Okay, the next question is, how does last year's spending on law enforcement compare to what's being planned, and why?
Chief Turner again from the Police Department. I think if you look at what's happening with law enforcement and where we are, when we look at a deep dive on where we are with crime over the last 50 years, we're probably as low as we've been since 1969 as it relates to crime stats. But also the commitment as relates to this administration and this council concerning making sure that our citizens and our visitors are safe. I think that the commitment is in the proof of that as we continue to grow our police department, putting resources on the streets so that we can continue to provide a safe environment for all of us to live and play.
I think you might want to add, they're asking the comparison between last year's budget and this year's budget and the component of the code enforcement moving to your shop.
Well, obviously the numbers are, the ad for the 41 officers is around $1.6 million for the half-year funding, and then the code enforcement is an additional $600,000, adding the entire code enforcement into the police budget. That's an additional, that total is about $8 million complete for the code enforcement, as well as the additional $1.6 million for the 41 officers. Those are funded at half a year, and so we will be able to add those officers on to the department as we move forward into the fiscal year.
Okay. This is the last call out there in the public for questions. I do want to add on the earlier question about the littering, because all of the departments are here, and some of the residents may not know, and particularly I think it was the question about the litter south of I-20, that we have had significant assistance and help in delittering with our corrections department. So I would just ask, I think I've seen Interim Chief Labat come in, if he can just come up and just educate the public a little bit about what you all have been doing, because it's been helping us in our district. I know you have been instrumental in my district in helping with some of the illegal dump sites with tires and other efforts, and I just want the public to be aware that we do have an additional resource for that.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Patrick Labat. I'm the Interim Chief of the City of Atlanta Department of Corrections. And Chairman, you are absolutely correct. We have taken it upon ourselves from a perspective of Keep Atlanta Beautiful, that under the mayor's guidance, that we've taken our 2-day-a-week program, which was designed for inmates to get out and clean right-of-ways and keep the streets clean, and moved that to a 6-day-a-week program. So together, and please understand, it is a partnership between APD and the COPS program, the community-oriented policing, and DPW, so that we can really create a strike team, if you will. So we have removed graffiti. We have collected tires, upwards of 7,000 to 8,000 tires. We have really created partnerships with the detail that allows us to react immediately. So if there are any emergency needs or any areas that really have special attention that we like to be able to give, and those are the things that we've done specifically. We've collected enough debris and garbage in and throughout Atlanta to fill up a little over 22 to 25 dump trucks, and so we have really taken this on and put detainees on the street and getting them to clean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, question from the audience, from Mr. Shakir. Besides the Beltline, are there any other building projects going on with taxpayer money?
If I could ask for just what clarity we mean by on building projects, certainly all of the infrastructure work that Public Works is doing is leveraging taxpayer money, but is that what you're meaning, sir?
Building structures.
Like actual buildings?
Like resident or high-rise or such as that.
Understood. Well, so certainly as we repair or potentially replace any fire stations, recreation facilities, city-owned facilities that need to be updated, there is certainly I would add an infrastructure backlog around our facilities as well that we are anticipating spending funds on in this particular year. If you're talking about public dollars being spent on private investment, as I sit here, I'm currently unaware of that occurring within this budget. It is certainly not our intent to be spending public tax dollars on, individuals' private homes.
The next question is, what is Invest Atlanta's budget to operate?
Actually, Councilmember, if I could just go back there is one component where in code compliance, if a home that has been vacated and is vacant for an extended period of time, we will expend public dollars to secure that property, to make sure that it is boarded up and safe. So there are, I want to make sure that I'm at least clear, there are times that we spend it on private property, but it is in the interest of the public in these cases. And then, I'm sorry, Councilmember, if you could read.
If someone from Invest Atlanta can answer, the question was, what is the Invest Atlanta's budget to operate?
Yeah, I think as it relates to this year's budget ask, we're asking for $3 million. It's about 31% of the total revenue used for the operations for Invest Atlanta. And the other two departments, this is mainly for the business development area, which was pretty much non-existent prior to this ask, so we are creating a new department with that $3 million. However, again, it's only about 31% of our total revenue to operate the department.
Henry Davis from Southwest Atlanta for the police department. Whatever happened to the money we were going to make with the sale, well, I don't know if this is the police department, but whatever happened to the money we were going to make with the sale of the city jail to Fulton County, will there also be a need for a jail so we can make some money? I guess that's more the administration. They want to know whatever happened to selling the jail to Fulton County, will there also be a need for a jail so we can make some money?
So those explorations, ultimately, the decision was made not to sell the jail, and we currently are operating a jail within the city. As to the specific question around whether we plan to sell it, at the current moment, we do not.
Okay. And the final one I have is from Ms. Carrie Williams. She's in the audience from Southeast Region News, and her comments were that there's not sufficient time for communications efforts to inform citizenry, city stakeholders. Public engagement, performance management measures need to be developed to measure performance of city government in the area of public engagement, particularly in the area of communication management. Highly in favor of the trend towards technology-based public engagement and commend the exploration of a virtual approach being included in the city public engagement strategy, particularly in the Atlanta city budget process. The question, what funding covers public engagement efforts for citizen participation in the Atlanta budget process? And I guess I'll answer that. There is no budget other than the use of city staff, I guess.
The question raised a couple points. The one that I liked particularly was around leveraging performance measures to measure engagement in the communication process. Certainly through the ATL STAT program that we have in the city, we measure a performance measure every single one of our operating departments. I am intrigued about the idea to expand that to cover communications as well, and I think that's an idea worth us taking down and exploring.
And I just want to add that we did start off with a public session where many of the department heads that you see here or their representatives were there, and they talked about their accomplishments and what they planned for this budget prior to the budget. We also did a citizen survey, which results should be coming out early next week, to ask you, the citizens, how you felt about service levels that we have here now, so it'll help guide us not only with this budget but for future budgets. So we're doing everything that we can and trying to be as frugal as possible and making sure that we engage the public in the budget process. That is all the questions that we have for now. I certainly want to thank those who attended in person and those who attended via the telephone calls and the internet calls. And so thank everybody and have a great evening.